And we're live with the road. Thank you for Swaggy to join me on this episode. We're gonna talk a bit about what he has learned throughout his career already, and then like his latest project, which is Down to Earth. Then we're gonna speak generally about the UK CS scene, and then of course the big roster move with Mezii to Cloud9 and how he fits into that team. And then lastly, some tips and tricks for upcoming players to improve themselves. So thank you for joining me here, Swaggy.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So in your in the beginning of your career, you were an AWPer, and you tried to go up through the ranks playing that role. So can you like talk a bit about what challenges you faced from climbing from a ESEA faceit poker until you actually eventually reached advanced?
I think from when I'm playing like at a lower level in the ESEA leagues, especially, you AWPing is easy; anybody can do it. But when you get to like in a level like advanced or even top level in main, AWPing becomes a lot harder because players' util usage becomes a lot better. So you've really got to be skilled with the weapon to be able to play at a high level and have like lots of impact. Like anybody can be like a passive AWPer, but to have like the impact on a game that an AWPer needs to have, you need to be really skilled with the weapon. And I think I learned like quite early into playing. So I played 2 seasons of advanced AWPing, I believe, and I found out that my impact as a rifler was a lot more important than what it was as an AWPer.
So if when you say that you need to be skilled with the AWP, I mean, yeah, of course you have to aim and shoot them, aim at them
Yeah,
and shoot them, right? But like, what else goes into it when you like say skills?
you need to be ridiculously active like at all times. Like when you get to a level like advanced, like players know how to counter and all. Pardon me, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
And what you need to do is you need to be able to move around the map and know when to move around the map and know when to catch out rotates, know what picks to take, and it becomes a lot more complicated than you just searching an angle with an op, which a lot of lower level oppers will play like.
Can you try and give maybe an example on a map, maybe from a round you've played yourself, so we can get the idea of actually how what this means?
Well, I can give you an example. So say today in my practice games we were playing Mirage, and Parman, the AWPer in my current team, he's very active on the map and he moves around all the time. So you'll see him on ticket like at the start of the round, and he'll be rotating over and he'll get another kill on short, like maybe 15, 20 seconds later. It's stuff like that, which is like players don't know where to rotate and where to position themselves after they've been spotted, and they often stay static as an AWPer, which means that you can be pinpointed and isolated in the round.
So like with targeted flashbangs, and it's actually easy
Just
to just
avoid
get
it
them
as
out.
well.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
easy to avoid them. So your job as the AWPer in this level is actually to try and stay unpredictable and
Yep.
try to like make them try and avoid you by but then you counter them with your positioning
Yeah. So you need to
generally.
outplay the enemy as well as outskill them.
Yeah, so there's like some kind of general game knowledge you actually need to have on a certain level before you can op pretty well, right?
Yeah. So I'd say AWPing like maybe middle of main is like most players will be able to do it very well who can just pick up an AWP and shoot. But when you get to like you're playing against a team who understands the util usage, knows how to isolate an AWP, but that's when having a very like a lot of impact, especially on CT side, is very hard to have when you're not moving around the map as well. But you need to be active all the time. You always need to be thinking on what positioning you can take.
Yeah, so this is primarily like CT oping these tips, right? And
Yeah.
this information. Yeah, so what about T-side oping? How is it like different?
T-side AWPing currently I would say the meta is a lot of T-AWPers will search a lot for picks, but you also get a lot of setup from players. So the way, as a caller right now, the way I would structure a lot of my T sides is based off what picks Parman wants to do and how he wants to impact the round. So if he, at the start of the round, if I have a plan in my head and he turns around and says something that's not that, I'll most of the time I'll change the plan around what he wants to do.
All right, so can you maybe again give an example of how you would set up an AWPer in this scenario?
So say on train, I have an idea that we should do a quick default into a BXIC, but then Parman has a spawn where maybe he wants to like to take a pick in team main or take a fast pick Ivy. You need to work around that, and you need to position your players to be able to support him to make these situations. Because a lot of the time at the start of the rounds, the spawns are very important. And if he gets a very early kill and he can fall back, which a lot of the time he can because we support him well, that allows a different round to play out and it allows a massive advantages like where the CTs will have to position themselves differently. They'll have to push for more info, and it gives us even more opportunity to win the round.
Yeah, so they have to take more risks, which you can
Yeah.
capitalize on, basically.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is basically more primary and spawn dependent opening. But what about mid round and late round opening? Because it's a completely different beast than what early round opening is.
A lot of mid-round opening currently, I would say, is you play around what your riflers are doing. So you lock down an angle, and your riflers will clear everything else. So like say on Mirage, maybe we've bursted A late round or mid round, and the AWPer just locks down CT, does nothing else, just holds CT for everyone else, so we can maybe take deep CT, take jungle, take the fights we need to take, while we just know we don't need to worry about that one angle.
Yeah, so you okay, so you actually make it so like AWPer locks down this angle, and then for like until you get the bomb planted, basically you rely on the rifles to create space, and then the
Yeah,
AWPer can win the round in the end,
yeah,
basically, right?
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Amazing. So you had to like figure all this out, all of this out, all of these tips and tricks and techniques and different plays to make. How did that transition into you becoming a rifler?
I actually ended up playing with. I always had the mentality that I would AWP because I was good at it. But when another AWPer came along, I'd happily take up a rifle because I would say like when I was coming through, a lot of people always thought my aim was really good. I don't know why, but but yeah. So I always had a rifle, and I'd have a lot of impact because I'd get a lot of entry kills and I'd make a lot of plays, even though like it wasn't necessarily where it needed to be, but I always find like an entry somewhere when I wasn't even trying. So I always like had a massive impact as a rifler. So I was like, if I can get an AWPer who's a solid AWPer, I can up rifle and I have that impact as well.
All right. So what did you have to learn from transitioning from rifle to op
Um,
or op to rifle? Sorry.
Rifling like at a level where like there's a lot of stuff going on, so like in advanced like a lot of rounds can get really chaotic mid round because the other team are like going to be skilled as well and they can trust their aim to be able to play really chaotic against you, but the same type of round could exactly play out and the other team's playing incredibly passive. You need to know what like entry pathing to take and how to counter like an enemy setup. So as a rifler especially, you need to be really aware on the setups every player can play.
All right. So for again, it's very basic again. Let's come with some examples. Make it like a bit juicy. So come
Yeah.
with an example for how you would entry and counter their setups. Like
Um, so say if we're entering, I don't know, Dust 2 on B site, we have an exact entry path on which every player is doing, which will counter most setups. But we also have a different entry path where if we know they've got a second op on B site. So it's like it's almost like we'll take info mid round to just like to fight figure out like what setup or have like an idea on how they're playing. Like we have a round that we play, which the entire round for the first 20 seconds, we find out exactly where every single player on the map is based on the info we find. And that allows us to change how we entry, change the style of the entry, like maybe even change what flashes we're throwing. So like on B for example, if we have an op, we tend to cross alter car and then cross close the door smoke. But if we know they've got maybe two rifles or there's only one B, we'll have the first two like first guy hard clearing car. The second guy will go towards car as well, but clear sight, and the third guy will go to the big box and clear sight from back there. But since there's no AWP, it allows a safe passage to the big box, which normally when there's no AWP we wouldn't do because it's a lot more riskier.
yeah. All right. Very interesting. Yeah. So anything else than like the entry pathing and stuff for you?
I feel as a rifler, you can get punished a lot more for your aggression. So as maybe you take a kill and it's a 5-on-4, a lot of players as a rifler, like when they're first starting out, will not. Maybe they'll take more risks, but as an OP, like you feel like you have to fall back because it's the one-shot weapon. So it's a lot more riskier being a rifle, like just inherently, because you stay in these positions where you shouldn't necessarily stay. So you need to learn when to fall back, when to stay, what info to take. Like I feel also on CT sides, taking a lot of players on active on getting info. So maybe there's a round where it's like 50 seconds left and you've got little util. It's a 5v5 still, but you have no info on when any of the enemy is. Like a lot of players will just sit back and do nothing. While I see the game right now, especially with the current meta, you need to have info at all times on what the enemy team's doing.
All right. So you also have to manage your risk reward,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
which you learned from being an opera. You had to like try and try and mix it and change it and learn from it for
Yeah,
becoming a rifler. All right, great. So now, which you already mentioned, you're an IGL now.
yeah.
Does that mean you're also the team captain?
I've been the team captain every single team I played in.
All right. So,
Yeah.
which how could you feel like the difference in responsibilities with going from rifler to also taking on the IGL role?
I feel like I know for especially I'm preparing a lot for practice now. Like I'm the guy who's in charge of what we're doing, what we want throughout the day. Um, I mean, luckily we have a very good manager who sorts most of like the scheduling and everything else, so I don't need to worry about that. But we have to like I have to, sorry. I have to decide what we're doing for the day, what we want to take from the day, what we need to learn, what we need to improve on. I need to be watching our games back, and if we play against an enemy that I think that I should be watching their demos, if maybe it's a best of three. I'm watching two demos on each map I expect to play them on. That could even be up to five maps, depending if I can't predict the veto like very well. So you just need to be prepared for everything, and preparing just takes up so much time.
Yeah, it's a real grind. Like that's where
Yeah,
the true Counter Strike grind actually comes in,
yeah.
where people like a lot of people don't know how much it actually takes. So you becoming an in-game leader and like making sure practice, like making the practice schedule and stuff. How do you find out exactly what you need to practice? Because you can't practice new strats every round, and you have to do something with defaults and stuff, you know. So
Yeah, so the one of the main things is that we're currently doing because this project that I've currently built is only a few weeks, maybe a month old. We one thing that we're focusing on right now is variation in defaults. So you need to know how to vary a default by throwing similar nades but doing different things off it, which is something that a lot of people a lot a lot of people will not like at first know to do. Like it's something that's very niche and something that I actually learned from somebody else. So that's something that's very important because it allows for you to fake info, and
yeah,
fake info allows fake it rotates the like rotates like maybe on a map like Dust 2 gets you a kill if you can play on that rotate sufficiently.
yeah. So it's the same as in Nuke where you throw the outside smokes every round, basically, right? It's the same idea,
Yeah,
right?
kinda, yeah.
Yeah, almost. So yeah, but this general philosophy is what like I normally call camouflage strats. So you camouflage whatever you're doing in the different defaults. Um, then you also have to make sure that your players knows how to think themselves. Is that
Yeah.
something you've encountered where you had to teach it to them, or is it something you've been lucky enough to not be able to teach them?
Um, well, in the last roster with like my last project in Down to Earth, with Miko and Ritter and with Fuzi and Emin, I feel like I had to take responsibility a lot more and micromanage, maybe even teach people a lot more. But in this current roster, I feel like I'm playing with players who are a lot more experienced than the last roster, probably even more experienced than I am, which allows for me to like not need to think about what they're doing all the time.
All right. So you as an in-game leader, do you know what your current strengths are? Do you know if it's reading your opponent, if it's mid-round calls, and how do you try and excel at doing what you believe you're best at?
Yeah, I can tell you like from the maps that we practice, I know exactly what our strengths on that map are. I know what our weaknesses on that map are, and I know how to fix it.
All right. So what about in-game, in-round on the T side? So are you good at calling from freeze time? Are you good at mid-round calling?
Uh,
What are your strengths here?
my definite strengths are calling from mid round. I feel like sometimes at the start of the round I can maybe get a bit like blindsided, which but then I have players such as Parman takes a lot of control, Chanky likes to take control, which allows for us to have a variation in what I'm calling and allows like a third point of view that's not me to allow like a call which I'll a lot of the time like if I'm not saying anything or if I'm just like let's just do a default here and they have an idea and they call the idea we'll just do it because there's no like it's not going to hurt us really if we're like especially if we're like changing up the pace and I haven't called to and someone's like we need to change the pace here like it's something that allows me to not necessarily need to be thinking all the time.
Yeah, so they actually help you out
Yeah.
with the burden of the calling a bit.
Mhm.
So a lot, what's pretty common actually is that very selfish in-game leaders actually want to keep doing all the calling themselves and all the thinking themselves, and then letting the other players just focus on fragging out. But you're more like open-minded and
Yeah.
open to suggestion for what to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I actually think that If an IGL who does everything himself isn't a good IGL. You need to have you can like of course you're the final decision, but you need to allow other players to express what they want to do and how they want to play Counter Strike, because end of the day, Counter Strike isn't one way to play it. You can play it 1,000 different ways. The way a CIS team will play it compared to a Turkish team compared to a French team is three completely different play styles, and none of them are incorrect.
Yeah, exactly. You've even seen both French teams and like Danish teams for which is
Yeah,
completely different winning a major,
exactly.
and Russian teams. So yeah. So which IGLs did you look up to and try to get your philosophy from when you started out becoming IGL?
An IGL who really helped me is one I played with, Cat Up. He really gave me a lot of insight on mid round calling, especially, and how to use info and faking info, especially. But like a lot of my style of calling is from a player who I played with for a long time called Toten G, who's a UK player. I won my first LAN with him. My first team was with him. I played with him for 2 3 years, so I took a lot of like my stylistics from him. Well, I finally I mastered what I call with the fine details from Cat Up, which helped me a lot.
All right. So there's no real pro players you've looked up to, and a good example is someone like Existence or Glaive or
Actually,
MSL
no,
or.
I do have a pro. Well, maybe not like a tier one pro, but a person who's a very good friend of mine, and I do have like a lot of good talks with. He helps me out. He's Tabs. Tabs is a very good friend of mine, and I take a lot of calling style from when I played with him, and he's been calling.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good example as well.
Yeah.
So with you having so much experience from people you know and not really relied so much on watching demos, is there some kind of like is there something you take away from the demos than you watch, which is not like the direct calling?
Yeah, well, I take strats from demos and stuff like that, but I've a lot of the time when I watch a demo maybe to look at how a team has changed their default. So right now, the current meta, it's so many defaults. Like there's barely any teams that have like a set thing for everything. The only team that really like who is unbelievable at that is Astralis, really. Everybody else, like you'll see a lot of defaults and a lot of default rounds. They'll fake information off their defaults, and then they'll do the same default and go on that information, and it's all about this right now, and it allows for you to really understand the current meta. So on Dust 2, something that's really changed in the current meta is the way you split B. It's completely changed. They don't do the mid B smoke anymore. They smoke CT from short, and they do a lurk smoke. They flash a guy into CT through that smoke, and he holds the rotates.
Yeah.
So it's like little things like that. You need to be very up to date with the meta, and you need to know how people are changing the meta all the time, and what teams can do against you with that. And you need to understand how teams will fake info.
So you also have to actually prepare your team on how to counter this info during
Yeah,
practice.
yeah,
Yeah, so you have to. So you're basically looking for these small tendencies to try and counter out for their basic defaults, right?
yeah.
And how they would
So
camouflage it.
so the way I look at it right now is, especially when you're in your team, you don't necessarily need a load of executes. Like it's good to have a set execute or maybe two set executes, like maybe one each side, like on the map. But realistically, you want to look at how you can play together in a team from a default, how you can change the info you're providing the other team. You can force teams to have info you want to give them to make them like change rotations, which is something that is right now what a lot of teams will do, and it's the current meta.
Yeah, so this reminds me a bit of a Danish method, which not a lot of many people know about, but it's called the Neon method, like the Danish player Neon. He invented this method where you start practicing defaults only, and
Yeah,
only defaults, and then when you're comfortable doing only defaults, then you put in executes, and then you only practice executes, and then you practice defaults and executes, and then the third step is where you practice plays. So different plays you can make. So you have the defaults where you learn younger people to communicate and how what they can do during the defaults. Then you learn the different executes. So you make like step one, you know how to get the map control to make the executes. Step two, you now can make the executes, and then step three, you have these gimmicky plays where you can actually win entire rounds off of just maybe a
Yeah,
B rush, which is some kind of timing play.
yeah,
So it reminds me a bit of that method actually, the
yeah.
way you're describing it.
Something I agree with, and it was actually the way Toten G liked to practice with a new lineup. So it's something I've took off him, and I've agreed with it a lot. Like playing from a default and having players who, on a default, can maybe find an entry or understand how the rotations are working to find a kill and make a mid-round call is something that's really important. And the more you practice that, it can't hurt because you get better at it, and your teamwork gets better. You react quicker, sorry, and it's a lot better overall to do that. And I normally will implement like a couple executes and we'll jump straight to we do defaults, but we need to know when to execute. We need to know what round to change the pace, what round to change what we're doing. So our execute on train B site currently, um, we still do the exact days we do on a default, but we end up with a very quick execute, so the rotation won't be there.
All right. So how would you try and learn and teach your players how to get ready for the executes and when to do a what you call it, um, a tempo shift? How do you know when practice how to change up paces and how to just keep doing or go slower even
The general rule I have is if you've done the same thing for 7 rounds in a row and you've won maybe 6 out of 7 rounds and or maybe they've took a attack pause, you change the tempo. That's what you do. That's the general rule I have. And it's also the same as if we lose 5 rounds in a row, we take attack pause. That's a general rule. It's just like little things like that. Like you need to know when to do it. But since we will do it on those timings, we can predict that another team will do it on those timings. Maybe we've lost 3 rounds from them just going fast out A on train. We know they're gonna go completely slow, wait for us to take team in. Like we know how they're gonna what they're gonna do to counter it. So that's why we surprise them by maybe we push 3 guys B and take out their B default players.
but how would you then try and counter their reaction play from then rushing out A when they see three people B?
Well, a lot of the time, if they're playing a slow default, there'll be 2 guys towards B. We have a 3-on-2 on B. If they go fast out A, the A players will be positioned in passive enough positions to not die, or maybe to at least get one kill and allow us with a fair retake.
All right, so basically play for the retake.
Yeah,
Yeah, all right. So let's talk a bit about Down to Earth and how that project worked out. So you played with my good friends Miko and Rytter,
yeah.
and you played with Fosi. And how did this team work out for you? Like,
I think the team it didn't we didn't have the natural chemistry, and I think at the current time Ritter really underperformed in the team to what was expected of him. So it just didn't come to anything, and we lost a lot of games that we individually felt that we shouldn't be losing, and that we thought we were better than. So it kind of hurt us a lot in the end when we lost these games, and it ended up with the team disbanding.
yeah. So throughout the duration of this team, I know it didn't last long, but can you maybe put some words on how the process was, what you learned from the project?
Well, it kind of showed me how much natural team cohesion is worth. So like having that natural chemistry and being able to have the confidence to make plays from a default, it really showed the value in that. So
All
like
right.
right now, the players I'm playing with, like from a default, will have a lot of confidence to look for an entry, look for a play, and call off it. But in that, it was like if I wasn't calling something or if Fuzi wasn't calling anything, it was silent.
All right. So, do you think that's some cultural differences from playing with more international players, or is it just something that was maybe just something that liked on the team?
Well, when I spoke with Miko and Ritter about it, they were like more expecting like a heavy structure, which I didn't want to implement because I feel like the way the meta is changing right now, it's constantly changing, it's constantly shifting. You don't want to have set structure for everything, otherwise you'll get found out really easily. And when the meta changes, you won't be ready for it. So I think that it was something that they weren't used to, and it just didn't gel because of that.
All right, so I think what they wanted was more like the traditional Danish calling
Yeah.
method, where you presented your own. I don't know if it's real UKCS, but it's more loose, more more Swedish-esque kind of
Well,
Counter
yeah,
Strike.
that's what we were looking for, but I wouldn't say that's necessarily a UK or a Swedish style. It's traditionally a Swedish style, but I'd
Yeah.
say it's more of just how the current meta is. Like the current meta is this very loose default calling. You do a lot of bursts, a lot of contact plays. You just have a lot of like confidence in what you're doing. Maybe a player wants to make a play, you just change your plan around. You allow the support for him. Like that's kind of a lot of what the current meta is.
So in some ways, it's a bit more structured, but also a bit more focused and emphasized face it puck on a higher level, basically, right?
Kinda,
With
but I
with
would
more
say
structure,
it's
right? Yeah.
yeah, it's like you have the structure behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's an easy way to explain it at
yeah,
least.
yeah. But
So,
like
yeah.
like the style that I was looking at is like a lot from like maybe on Mirage I look a lot like at complexity, and they allow for like this crazy style that they just headshot everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Reminds me a bit of like the old school Space Soldiers
Yeah,
online kind of Counter Strike, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. So, let's talk a bit about like generally the UK scene and why you're not playing in there anymore. So, can you maybe talk a bit about what the general problems are with the UK scene?
I think that a lot of players will they recycle the players constantly, so the same players will play for the same teams over and over and over. So I think that was like a problem with like what quote unquote the old guard of the scene, which a lot of them have actually quit the game and moved on. So like they recycled a lot of the same players. There's barely ever a chance for a young player to have a chance in one of these teams. Like a lot of the time, they like a new five would have to make the opportunity for themselves. So what that reminds me of is that Vexed roster with Adam, Fraser, Mezii, Cray, and Link. They made a name for themselves and became the best team in the UK. No one gave them an opportunity to. They just did it for themselves. And then a European teams came and gave them the opportunities. But I would never look at that and like think that the other team with the older UK players would want one of those players. They would just go for other players who've played with them before, which I think was a massive issue. But I think that issue will have been resolved naturally by the players moving on from the game.
So now you actually need some now like the grassroots scene in UK actually has to show how strong it is
Yeah,
when
but
with yeah.
sorry, I think that is also coming through because there's been a new team called UMX and Vex Gaming. Well, the new Vex Gaming, they're coming through and they almost came out of nowhere. And like their Vex is doing very well. They almost made advanced playoffs. To be they when I watched them, they play very good Counter Strike actually. Like they play like a very structured game, which I think Docs, who's the caller for their team, has implemented over playing with the same five players for a long time. So that's allowed them to become very good. Because I remember when I first played against them, I thought their team like wasn't very good at all. Then the next time I played against them, they beat me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it was because they had this really good style of Counter Strike that was like it punished a lot of mistakes, and they had such good like natural chemistry. They had good teamwork, and I think they really grew as a team. And I think Docs has became a very good caller. But at the same time, UMX are the opposite of that. UMX are a team who literally try to be Furia.
Yeah.
Their IGL changed his name to Artist to because of art.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're having a lot of good success recently. They made top 16 in one of the DreamHack qualifiers, which they beat like Wizards in, which is Blackie and Bernard's team, who are
Yeah.
like decent in advance. They're in main playoffs. I actually have to play against them on Monday. We're playing them in main playoffs,
Yeah.
so it'll be a fun game. But I can imagine it's gonna be very frustrating because their style of Counter Strike is not nice to play against.
But I could imagine playing that kind of Counter Strike is really fun, actually.
Yeah, yeah, like
Hilarious.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I watch their games and some of the games are crazy. But like again, they're having a lot of success doing it and they play well as a team, which is important. They have a style that plays well for them. As much as you might hate playing against it, if that style works for them, it works. So it's like and it allows them to be the best they can be, which I think they're really becoming a good team. And I think it's really good to see two UK teams who have players who aren't experienced. They haven't had a better opportunity than before. They've made it for themselves, and they've allowed themselves to get it to such like a high point where one of them came second in main last season, which was Vexed. They lost in the finals, but they beat like Giants in best of three, for example,
Yeah.
which is a good result. And then UMX, I would say UMX should, even if they lose to us on Monday, they should still make advanced quite easily.
Yeah. So just a fun fact, when Furia was in Europe last time around before Corona, they were like there were some Danish teams I talked with who practiced against them, and they played Inferno against them. And when Furia had the T side, they somehow oh you're blowing into your mic.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so they somehow managed to get a T player into CT spawn on Inferno within 1 minute and 30 seconds every single round, and they didn't know how to counter it at all. And whenever I think of Furia, I just think of that exact thing, and just thinking like, oh my god, I really wanted to try and play like that. So you just catch them off guard and
Yeah.
like a pain in the ass for them. Just yeah, it's a fun story. So yeah, what's very interesting is that you can have these two Yomex and Vex with completely different styles. So on the one side a bit Astralis-esque, and on the other side like Furia-esque. How well, like what do you think the entire UK scene can get out of having such different styles of teams becoming like pretty decent?
I think it allows for a lot of variation. So if you can have a player or an IGL or a team who can implement both styles into the same game, it allows for you to you can take complete control over a T side by being that your team, the other team will have no clue what they're doing. It's like almost like what Navi do. Navi can be completely Fury and they can have simple electronic killing all 5 people in 10 seconds, or they will wait until 15 seconds left in the round to do anything.
Yeah, yeah, that must be inspired from Zeus because that's all he did back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's amazing. So, like with this, let's say the grassroots, like showing their promise and their potential with these new lineups. Do you have like, do you think there's a bright future for UKCS? So there's not only like now Mezii, but then Alex and Smuya as pro players.
I think you've got a lot of potential for players to be maybe not necessarily a very good UK team because I mean even Endpoint chose to go European, which
Yeah.
hurt me a
Yeah.
little bit because I was hoping that maybe they'd give me a call, but no. But like they'd allow for players to perform well, and they could even be a stepping stone to European teams, which I think is the current way I would look at. But I think even these teams, they're still most of the players in these teams are young. They have a bright future, and if they keep playing the way they're playing, they keep getting like if they keep learning from what they're doing, they can easily make it into an MDL. Like right now, Europe Online especially is so open. Any team in the top 30 teams of advanced can beat anyone in advance, which is crazy.
Yeah. So let's go a bit away from the UK scene and then talk a bit about your friend Mezii, who was so lucky to get into Cloud9.
Yeah,
And can you maybe talk a bit about what you know of how he fits into the team and what maybe he gets out of playing in there?
I think he's playing basically the exact same role he was playing in Game of Legion. So when you look at Mezii and you look at the stats he has, you'd think he'd be playing connector. You'd think he'd be playing like a connector on Mirage, make mid understood, but he doesn't.
Yeah,
He plays B apps on Mirage. He plays Ivy on Train. Like he plays these positions where you wouldn't expect the impact he's having, which is why he's such a very good player. It's because he's having these impacts from positions where you wouldn't expect him to, and it allows for him to be this really good player, and he's like a really good player to rely on. It's actually a player that he really reminds me of, who's a very good friend of mine, is Grooks, the
yeah,
Swedish player who used to play for Smash. Yeah,
yeah,
he very similar style of play. They're both anchor players, but they both have this incredible aim where they all get 3 kills if a team comes to your bomb site, which is like such a it's a rarity I'd say right now for like such a like an crazy aimer, or maybe like even like Rops actually,
yeah.
like where they just lock down a bomb site on their own because they have an insane aim and like their decision making is near perfect.
So do you think it's gonna be a challenge for him going up to this many levels?
Personally, I think he'll be the best player in that team.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
What?
the
What?
only player that I
Yeah.
can see being better than him is Woxic
But what makes you say that? Woxic has been number one. Alex has been number one as well.
because he's just no matter what Mezii does, he gets 30 kills. Like it's actually crazy to see. Like I remember a game where we played against him in the upper bracket like semi-finals, and we lost both maps 16-14. On both maps, his entire team was negative except him, who was on 35 kills on both maps,
Oh
and we
Jesus!
were we were a bit sore.
Get on my back, team. Jesus, yeah, that's
I just
amazing.
I just think his natural skill, but also the way he holds himself professionally, And the way I've talked to him about like maybe like what he does for his warm up routine and stuff like this because, I mean, obviously I have my methods on how I prefer to do it, which I'm more of like a Zaiwu. Like I won't really warm up. Like if I warm up, I feel like I play worse.
Yeah.
So I will I will tend to play like little before practice, and I'll just come in. I'll probably warm up my grenades. That's about it. My aim, I would tend to just allow to like warm up in the game because that's how I feel lets me play best. So I play face pugs to warm up, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like I know Mezii, he has a very strict routine where he will spend an hour just throwing grenades to make sure he remembers every single grenade. Then he'll do an hour of deathmatch. Then he'll like he has all this stuff that he does, and he does it every day without fail. He's so professional in everything he does.
Pretty impressive that he could like have a university degree and study like next to
Yeah.
the to that time schedule. So, can you tell me like your overall opinion of Cloud9 and how do you think they're gonna fare in the Counter-Strike land splits?
Uh, I'm not sure right now. I think either they'll be very good and they'll hit the top 10 really early, or they'll struggle for a long time. I'm not too sure actually because we're looking at this. This is Alex's first time without Zaiwu,
Yeah.
other than back in obviously LDLC, but I wouldn't say that LDLC team were great.
Uh,
I think they only hit top 30 once.
yeah. Yeah, they weren't that
Uh,
great.
yeah, so it's you can't look at it like as Alex is this insane IGL. He's not. Oh, maybe he is, but he's not proven to be. He had Zaiwu. When Zaiwu is a freak of nature, you can't. It's like saying a manager's great because Messi has an amazing season. You
Yeah.
can't say that.
No.
But you got to look at it like this is Alex's opportunity to prove himself. So maybe that gives him this extra edge over other teams. But I'd also say that it also depends a lot on Woxic. Woxic's being awful online, but he obviously is crazy online. He's one of the best players in the world online. But online recently, he was awful. That's why he got removed from mouse sports.
Yeah.
It wasn't just his attitude; his performances were terrible. So there's a lot of different pieces, and it's like, can Esitac really come into this European roster and keep up that performance that he's having in sorry having in a team like Astralis, where Astralis have everything in the book,
So,
like
yeah.
and even Floppy's coming across to Europe for the first time. Will Floppy perform in Europe, or is he just like insane in NA? We don't know.
So,
There's so many
yeah.
gambles. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine, it's fine. Yeah, that's true. So, what do you think of the Ezotech move? Like, is it a good business for Cloud9? Is like,
It's good business for Astralis. I think like the money that he's getting paid is if he's a player who's been in a top 10 team for years. He's not. He came into Astralis. Yeah, he had that good period. That good period was maybe a month, 2 months. I wouldn't say he warrants the money that was paid for him, and I don't think, especially the salary, is near what like he should have had. I think there's other options that were better than SE Tech. Like maybe I'm just naming a few. I think like maybe for that money you could buy Madden from Godsend, even Zen from Godsend, players like that who are like maybe not on that top 10 team, but they've got experience in a top 15 team for years and years. Well, years and years in Zen's case, for about a year in Madden's case, where you could probably get them for half, like a quarter of the price even, and you're paying them not nowhere near those wages, and they'll probably have more of an impact on your game than I think SC Tech currently could.
the business for Astralis, like what they did was they took Ezotech in, got him for free in June.
Yeah,
Then he played there for 4 months, only online during to Corona. He
exactly.
he played well online, and then he gets sold with this massive contract to Cloud9. You know, but in some way, Cloud9 they just mentioned, okay, well we're signing Floppy and Mezii as like the third, fourth man, so they needed like a big marquee signing for the fifth man for like to get the hype of the Colossus,
Yeah,
going. So like a name like Madness and wouldn't have like done that justice. So
I think a name like Zen would, in my opinion. I think Zen's proven himself to be one of the best outside the top 10 in the world. But I think that obviously Etitak's younger, he's got more years in him than Zen would. So maybe they're looking at that as well.
well, yeah, they did sign a 3-year deal, so
Yeah.
yeah, it might be, yeah. But the one thing that puzzled me a bit was that on the contract which Henry J released said that he was an aggressive rifler, which he was
Mm.
basically slotted in Subnix's roles in Cloud9 or in Astralis. So
Yep.
this kind of contradicts what he's like, how he play, like how he is as a player.
Not really. Etitak before he moved to Astralis didn't play those positions.
No,
I
I no, yeah,
yeah, I played against him numerous times before that. and he definitely is an aggressive rifler in how he wants to play. But you've also got to look at it, like when he's coming to Astralis, like there's no way he has what he wants in that team. But he had performed really well playing those roles, which is why I look at that and I'm like, is he really going to perform as well as he did in these aggressive roles? Will he have that impact that he had from being the last man alive? Because it's you don't know. Like it's a massive gamble, and the amount of money they paid for this gamble is, I don't think it's worth it.
But don't you think like the experience which Sateki got from Astralis with the methods they practice and all of the secrets in Astralis, he has them now and he can bring them to Cloud9. Don't you think that's worth some money as well?
Yeah, it's obviously worth some money, but I don't think the methods that Astralis use are very like they're not hidden. Like I know how Astralis practice. I've talked about it with people before. Astralis play one set of scrims a week and they'll do server work every other day. They'll just talk about stuff and come up with strats for like 4 days a week. They'll have one set of like scrims a week, or maybe two. Like that's how the Astralis practice. It's not a very hidden method. Like Zonic, the way Zonic will do things is quite open. He's open with it. He talks about it a lot. So I don't necessarily think that that is a huge impact on it. What I think would be very useful that he can bring from it is their rotations and how they react to things. If they have set reactions and set rotations that he can bring is a very important thing, which could be very useful. But again, I think that these reactions and set rotations are things that a lot of the time, if you want to really perform in a team, you want the team to be comfortable with them because one player to another player might have different ways to react to things, which both can be right.
Yeah, it just depends on if they're on the same page, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So if he comes in and four players completely disagree with him, it's not very useful.
Yeah, yeah, true. But that might be something Henry G looked at when he tried to sign him. So
Yeah.
you know Henry G a bit. So can you maybe talk a bit about like why is he a good GM for Cloud9? Like,
He's a good GM because he's been around the Counter Strike scene since the beginning of Source. He was very good in Source. Obviously, he's a good player, and then he came in and he became like he's got every single contact you need. Like his casting career and like everything he's done in casting and hosting allows him to have these contacts, but also allows him to have an understanding of the game that not many other GMs will have. But at the same time, he loves the game so much. It's not a job for him. Like this is his life. Like everything he does is for Counter Strike. So it allows him to be passionate, and he will genuinely have the best interest of the team at all times. Because sorry, he's not just looking at stats. He's watching the game. He's with them at every boot camp. He loves Counter Strike, and that's what makes him so good at his job because he will 100% focus himself at all times on the game.
so you think he can be an X factor in them actually reaching top 10?
Yeah, I think he will. He brings a level of coolness, but also if they were to make a roster change, I feel like it's like what Frank Lampard is doing at Chelsea. Frank Lampard has this pull where players will want to play with under him.
Yeah.
I think Henry G has like a similar pull factor for players.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good point. The same with Gerrard and Rangers, like
Yeah,
there's this, yeah, and like Mourinho at every single team he's in,
yeah.
like, yeah, great. Like, do you have some other notes on Cloud9 which you feel like you haven't said yet?
Uh, I do feel like they'll break top 10 eventually, but I don't think it'll be as quick as everyone thinks it's going to be. I think their first few tournaments they'll flop, and then after a few months, that's when I think they'll get good.
All right. So, do you think they're gonna win a tournament in their honeymoon phase?
No,
Do you think how long do you think it's gonna take before they win their first tournament?
four to
Before,
five months.
yeah,
Four to
before
five.
Rust.
It will probably be a LAN. I bet you they'll win a LAN.
All right, and that's before roster changes.
Yeah, I don't think they'll change roster.
All right. Well, great. Okay, so let's talk a bit about some tips to upcoming players. So some methods you used to try, like, to get to where you are now, and maybe talk a bit about how you are trying to improve yourself to become even better and reach higher goals than where you are currently.
I think the biggest tip that I can give anybody is make as many contacts as you can. I didn't make contacts for the first few years of when I was playing at a semi-professional level, and only the past 6, 7 months I've started to try and branch out and make these contacts, and it's got me trials, it's got me friends who are very who are a lot better than I am. It's friends who are a lot more experienced. Like one of my best friends in Counter Strike right now is Fates, and I mean I don't need to explain Fates' career; it speaks for himself.
Yeah.
And just talking to people and allowing yourselves to have these contacts allows you to have opportunities to learn from them. So I've learned so much from playing with Fates and tabs in just a pugging sense, and it allows for you to do stuff like this. And the second tip, it's hand in hand with this. Whenever you have an opportunity to learn from someone better than you, take it. Don't don't be upset when someone criticizes you. Like learn how to do it better.
Have an open mindset, basically.
What was that? Have an open, yeah,
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 open
yeah.
mindset. Yeah, yeah. All right. So, what are you going to do to make help yourself become better and like become the next Mezii of the UK scene?
I'm constantly talking with like players like Zen, like Fates, like Tabs. Where can I improve? What am I doing bad? Like how can I fix this issue? What if you've had this issue? What would you do to do this? Like what would advice would you give? I'm always asking these questions, and I'm always like taking the advice they're giving me, and I'm like trying to apply it to what I'm doing. So it allows for me to constantly be thinking of how can I be better than myself. But another thing that I'm also looking at is I'm also reviewing my demos and I'm listening to my teammates. If I mean, 99% of the time when I make a mistake, I will understand I made a mistake the second I've done it because you kind of just know you've done it. Like, and you often, especially like the level of practice I'm playing against, I get punished for the mistakes I make, which is a very good thing. So it allows, so just learning and constantly thinking of what can you do better, what can I do better, what can the team do better as well. It's always a sense of that's what's going to improve you as a player, because end of the day, it's not always 99% of the time it's not your aim. Right now, it's your positioning. What nade have you used? How have you used your nades? What reactions have you done to what nades they've been using? How are you positioning yourself around what your teammates are doing?
Great, amazing. So, do you have any final words before we wrap this up?
Uh, Not that I can think of. Oh, actually, I do have one. My friend Jesus wants a shout
Shout out to Jesus. Great. Thank you
out.
for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.